Welcome back to another video, everybody. Very happy to be doing this one. A great game yesterday. We're going to be going over that. Tottenham 2, Man City 0 at the Etihad. A very early kickoff here in the United States for me. It was a 5:30 kickoff, but still happy nonetheless to get up and watch the boys play. So let's just get right into it. We're going to start out by looking at the stats and figures and player ratings and all that business. So just a couple things to touch on real quick. So if we look at the possession numbers and kind of the basic stats for the entire game, we see actually Tottenham, even though they gave up 0 goals, 1.55 on expected goals, there were a couple decent chances. That number actually seems a little bit big to me, and I think that's mostly due to that big chance that Vicario saved in the first half. That was probably a very high XG chance, but great save there. We're going to be looking at that a little bit later. But so if we go back to the baseline stats, we have ball possession 61%, 39%. Actually, in the first half, Tottenham a little bit more, and in the second half dropped off as we kind of tried to, I don't know, I don't think we tried to sit back nearly as much as we did against PSG, but still sat back a little bit more and kind of saw the game out. But then shots on target, this is what I was very happy to see. 12 total shots, 5 shots on target, 3 big chances in the game. It's like Thomas Frank is playing the system that is very, very interesting to me, where like it's not a like sit back and defend system. He mostly plays in mid block with high intensity pressing. And in this one, Manchester City for sure, even though they had 61% of the possession and they actually won on XG, it didn't feel at any time in the game that they were really getting into things and creating really good chances. I think the XG numbers were probably for just based on a couple really high XG chances. Haaland had a missed header from only a couple feet out, and then there was a Vicario save on Marmoush early or midway through the first half that we're going to look at in a second. That they probably accounted for most of the XG in this game. So if we look at the stats again, overall, even though stats look like they favor City in some ways, I'm very happy to see that Tottenham is creating chances and we're actually still staying in the game and getting a lot of opportunities. So that was really great to see. An overall great performance. We're going to look into some of the plays and some of the key things that I pointed out from watching the match and then rewatching it this morning. But I just want to touch on a couple things here real quick. This is just hilarious to me how, like, and we can look at SofaScore as well. Like, SofaScore is not much different, but like how these companies or apps or whatever you want to call them track player ratings. Cause it's like, I think for the most part, I would agree on some things but like Jed Spence with the 6.7, no chance. He was fantastic yet again. Binta, yet again, a really strong performance. 70.6 is probably low for him. Popsar, though. Popsar was, again, fantastic. All over the pitch, creating chances, created that goal by his pressing, the second goal that we had. 6.7 is ridiculous. Vicario with an 8.1. He barely had anything to do. He had some good saves, but barely had anything to do. So an 8.1 is crazy. Richie is 7.6, probably deserved more than that. Paulinho being the man in the match, I don't necessarily disagree with, and an 8.2 is probably a little high for him, but I think he had a fantastic match yet again. But then Brennan with an 8.0, he was pretty much anonymous in this game again for the second straight game, but for the second straight game gets a goal. So it's like Brennan's just an anomaly. I don't even know what to say about Brennan at this point, but Johnson again, ole. So that's kind of the baseline stats. Those are what I wanted to kind of just touch on those real quick and kind of just look at what the stats were and everything like that. But what I really want to get into is a couple things that we pointed out here in the match. So what I really want to get to is the pressing, and I want to go over the goal. I want to go over Vicario's save, both goals. Sorry, but first I want to start with this. So if we look here, so this right here, that's João Palhinha. João Palhinha, again, just had a ridiculous performance, covering so much ground. Him, Bentancur, and Popsar cover so much ground, do so much for the team, and it's not just like they're running back and forth and they're not contributing at all. As we'll see in some of these these clips further on, like they're contributing. Like they're just playing out of their minds right now, and it's awesome to see in Frank's system what he's able to get out of these midfield players. But so that's Paulinho right here. What I want to break down here is just see how much he's having to go back and forth between the lines and do so much out of possession. So we see that one. Move on. Now he's here. He's moving up the pitch, and he's going to be pressing the ball here. So he started around in this area. He's moving all the way up, and he's going all the way up to press the ball and help with Richie. And then we see just a little bit later in the play, Man City starts to kind of develop an attack, and now we see Paulinho here. Oops, sorry. We saw Paulinho here now covering space, and he's going to be moving in, and he's going to be trying to get a tackle on Haaland as he's coming into the box trying to get on the end of the ball. So just between three, this is all the same progression for Man City. They work it back. Paulinho presses, and they're able to drive forward, and now you see Paulinho going all the way back here. He's just like, he's doing everything, and it's really, really cool to see that him, Pop, and Bentancur, because I can make the same diagram for the other two players to see how much ground they're covering in and out of possession. But what I wanted to focus on Paulinho about is that in the post-game press conference, Thomas Frank was talking about how he's not even fully fit yet. And that's really, really encouraging, because what I thought we would be getting out of Paulinho is pretty much just a destroyer. Like a crazy stat is that over the last 3 Premier League seasons, he leads the Premier League in tackles, and I think it's by like a gigantic margin of like 100 or something like that. And keep in mind, he didn't even play in the Premier League last season, so that's counting for 2 seasons at Fulham. He's just like, that's what we thought we were getting, is definitely that destroyer type. But as we see in the second goal scored, like he's actually doing a lot of things. And what I'd be really curious to see is like once we get a better sample size on him and see kind of how Frank wants to settle with his midfield, because you would assume that we'd still be getting in another 10 type of player. There's rumors out there of a whole bunch of players. We'll get into that maybe tomorrow or something like that. But like, I want to see how important Paulinho is going to be in this team and what he's going to be asked to do. I think that's going to be very interesting to check out as the season progresses. But so let's go back to this. I wanted to highlight on this one. We're not going to progress through. This is just a single screenshot of just seeing how far up the team is in pressing. So you basically have your 2 midfielders, your 3 attackers, Richie, the striker here, and it looks like they're triggering on the center back a lot of the times. So if you go through and look at some of these screenshots we have, it looks like a lot of the times when John Stones would have the ball and Ruben Diaz, that's when Richie would push up and somebody would follow. So I don't know, I'm not using it. Richie would push up, somebody would follow, and they would try to kind of create like funnels around the player and create turnover. So that's exactly what we're going to look at here in this next set of slides. So this starts out here. You have Ruben Diaz. He's on the ball here, and he's going to be progressing the ball out to John Stones, working it around, and they're going to try to push up the field. But what happens here is we go to the next slide. So now you have John Stones on the ball, and you have John Stones. That was Nico Gonzalez, my bad. Ruben Diaz, John Stones. So now you have Diaz, and what I really like to see is I like to see Richie here. Sorry, being a little slow as I'm trying to work out these new controls. You have Richie here. I don't know if you can see. He's pointing out. He's saying, all right, send him to this way. We're going to trap him right here, which is really, really interesting and good to see in the pressing, is that they're so oriented. What's the word I'm looking for? They're like so already on the same page, and they know what triggers to go off of, and they're so methodical in the way that they're doing it. And only being a month into Frank's time as head coach, that's really, really good to see. So you see Richie pointing out to, I believe that's João Paulinho. All right, get over to John Stones. We're going to get him over there. So as we move forward, now we have Paulinho telling Bentancur, or no, that's Johnson, sorry. Brennan Johnson telling Kuti, okay, we're not going to catch him right here. So now we're going to move on to the next phase of pressing. So then we go to that one. Now we get a little bit lucky here because John Stones falls, but you have him playing the ball in here to Ryan Cherky. And when Ryan Cherky gets the ball, he's already covered by 3 people. So he can't really make this pass back. He's not really going to be able to turn and make this pass back. So he's already kind of screwed as soon as he gets the ball. And that's all due to them funneling over and trapping him here. So what I really like about that is because you see this one, he basically just can't recover possession. It rolls through and it goes to Jed Spence, and now we have possession. So that started all the way back here with Ruben Diaz on the ball, or Nico Gonzalez on the ball. And we track them all the way across the field. All the way across. I'm going to get used to these controls, believe me. So that was really encouraging to see. I love seeing them being able to press that high and press that coordinated, I think is the word I was looking for earlier. So then we go to this next one. I just want to point out how good this save was and how funny this moment is. So this is a big chance that they had Marmouche in on goal, Holland driving through. Do we even have that screenshot before? No. So Holland plays the ball. He drives through kind of from back here. He drives all the way back through here, and he plays the ball through to Marmouche. And you can see here you have as Cherokee, and I don't know who that was, but you have 2 players already from Man City hands up thinking that it's going to be a goal before he even takes a shot off. And I mean, they'd kind of be right. If you look at what's going on here, he basically just has to beat the keeper left or right. And so he doesn't really make the most out of it. But what I wanted to point out here is too, so by the time the ball's through and he's on the ball here, you can see just how much space, oops, that's not where I wanted that to be, just how much space Vicario has to cover. He has to break down and move into all this space to get big and to block the shot. So that's exactly what he does. If we move into the next one, he gets big. He basically, Marmouche doesn't take a great shot, but he shoots it, I think, basically right at his left arm here. But he beats this angle to where he really can't take the shot out this way. And this cutting it back across his body is apparently not what he's favoring. I think that's probably what he would had to have done to make the goal. But I just think that's so funny that like this was such a good chance that you have these City players basically already hands up thinking that's going to be a goal. And it doesn't end up being a goal. It ends up being a great save from Vicario. So the last thing I want, or not the last thing, the first goal I want to go over here and just touch on how great it is to see us being a little bit more variable in the way that we're building out attacks. With Ange, it was, for the most part, a lot of just playing through the back and playing through kind of the same progressions. It was really frustrating a lot of times when you were watching Ange's team because you could kind of already tell exactly what movements they were going to be making and what passes they were going to be making. And so like you had to imagine that the opposition was already thinking the same exact thing. And so there were a lot of times shutting it down before we could even move through the lines and get to the other side of the pitch. But with Frank, what's been really interesting to see is the varied types of ways that they're building out. So this one, you have Pedro Porro. He's on the ball here, and he's basically just going as far as he can down the line. I don't know from watching the game and watching just the view that we have here if he spots somebody down there and he's trying to intentionally kick it down to that player, or if he's kind of just kicking it downfield. It could be either, where he's kind of trapped in this corner right here. It could kind of be either. But regardless of that, what ends up happening is you have a great ball played into, that's Pop right here on the ball. He's heading the ball right here. And he's going to knock it on to Richie right here, who, as you can see, is already making his run. And he's about ready to turn and go this way on to goal. So we have, if we go back to all we have right now is one pass from Pedro Porro out to Pop, who's going to then flick it on to Richie. So within the matter of 2 or 3 seconds, 3 touches of the ball, we're already on. And you have Richie, because he's kind of stumbles, I believe that was John Stones, or maybe that's Ruben Diaz. He kind of stumbles, and so Richie is already in acres of space, and you already know what he's going to be doing. He's going to drive forward. You have Brennan here, who's going to drive toward goal. and then just play that cut back across the box for the first goal. So what I also wanted to point out about this is just how much ground Brennan covers, because I think for all the faults that Brennan has, you can kind of see why Frank has him in this position and he keeps playing him out on the left. Because look at where Rico Lewis is right here. Rico Lewis is in a decent position. He's already ahead of Brennan to go and probably not get to the man, but to get a good block on and cut out the cross. But what ends up happening is Brennan's just so dang quick that by the time, I think it's actually, I have one that he's a little bit further back, maybe. Do I or do I not? I do not. Okay, so we're going to go back to this one. So you can tell, though, by the amount of distance Brennan covers, he's a couple yards behind him. And by the time the ball is going to get played in by Richie, which is going to be this ball in here, across the box. I need to figure out how to do that curved one. But anyways, he's going to play that ball across the box to Brennan, and Brennan's going to get it on top of it. And so I think this is the one I was trying to show before. So you can see exactly how much ground Brennan's covering and how much, I think that's a big, strong point that Frank sees, his ability to get to that back post and the amount of ground with his speed he's able to cover, I think is probably why Frank has him in that position. So, and then even though Rico Lewis still gets a decent attempt at a block on here, you can see Brennan's just, he's already gotten to the ball and he's going to finish that 9 times out of 10 probably. So this last goal I wanted to go over, again, just talking about the pressing and talking about the contributions from Popsar and the midfield, and even Richie. I mean, we have to give Richie his credit too, because he's doing a lot of work here throughout the game and pressing as well, doing a lot of those hard yards that he doesn't really get credit for on the stat sheet. But I also kind of want to just point out, like, I think this specific goal in this specific moment is also largely on James Trafford. I think it was mentioned in commentary a couple times that if that's Ederson, he's probably a little bit more composed and probably just goes long or probably makes a better decision, and that situation doesn't even happen, which I think I would agree with. But it is interesting that Trafford decides to make this pass here, because what he ends up doing, and we'll see it in the next one, he ends up making that pass there with Pape closing ground on the player right here, I think is Nico Gonzalez, when he has the option to either go to John Stones or Ruben Diaz, either way, to the right or left or up. Like, he's actually in a pretty decent position. And if he just gets his head up, maybe this is an instruction that Pep's saying that you're not kicking it long, but who knows. But even if he gets his head up, he can make a pretty clear pass here to Rico Lewis. So it's just really interesting that he decides to make this decision of going and playing that ball directly into, I believe, Nico Gonzalez. Sorry, that previous screenshot was Oscar Bob here. Here's Rico Lewis right here. But he plays it into Nico Gonzalez, who's being actively closed down by Pop, and Pop is going to get there so easily with his intensity, his speed, and his willpower to get to that ball. He's going to get there. So I don't know why Trafford makes that decision. It was obviously a bonehead decision, because then you have Richie on the ball here. He doesn't quite get it out of his feet, but what that leaves in the next screenshot is the opportunity for João Palhinha to go and to get a shot on, and gets a little deflection off of Ruben Diaz, I believe it is, but he still gets a shot and a goal, and we're wheeling away for the celebration. So it's like that whole sequence is obviously partly due to Trafford being uncomfortable, and maybe that moment was a little bit big for him yesterday, who knows, but obviously the pressing work that had been going on throughout the game before that. Sorry, I really need a drink of water, but it's too far away from me right now. All the pressing work leading up to that had definitely gotten into the mind of the City players, and that was a big moment where they probably were thinking, Trafford specifically, that there's not a lot on, and so I'm going to have to just make something happen here. And maybe that's the coaching he was getting earlier, to just make that pass. I don't know. Bad decision nonetheless. But the last thing I wanted to look at here is this moment that I thought was very interesting, because it ends up being Brennan Johnson. And this is kind of a Brennan Johnson, this is that dichotomy that you have with Brennan Johnson, because overall I don't think he played great. I think he has his strengths, as we kind of just broke down in that previous sequence. But then he makes a lot of choices that I just don't really agree with. And you can see Frank didn't like this decision either. Okay, so here's that attacking situation. Right now, we have Rodrigo's on the ball here, and he's going to progress forward and lay it off to Brennan. So Brennan, as we can see in the next screenshot, Brennan has the ball here, and now it's a 3-on-3 with Richie and Kudus driving in back post and driving in through the middle of the box. So as we go to the next one, you can see Brennan does a good job at turning his defender, and he's got John Stones, I believe that is, on his hip. And now he has a good opportunity to do something with the ball. So what you would probably think he's going to do is, as you can see, we have Popsar driving into space here. So probably the good decision would be to, as he's turning his defender, to lay that ball off into Pop's path. And then Pop then has the opportunity to either shoot from there or play it across the box, maybe back post to Mo Kudus. So you can see we have Pop's. This is the pass that you're looking for from Brennan. As you see, he turns his defender, and now he's driving to the middle of the box. But what he does is he takes the shot, and it just skies over the bar. And as you can see from Thomas Frank, not very happy with that. Actually, this screenshot this is really the only good screenshot I was able to get out of it. I thought this was funny. He's raising hands like, what the heck, looking at Justin Cochran. But if we actually look at the clip, Thomas Frank's livid. He's literally like, what the heck was that kind of decision? And I think that's the thing with Brennan Johnson, and where we're going to look at a clip here in a second of Wilson Odebear, that even though we look down at the situation, those screenshots where Brennan has his strengths and he's able to beat defenders with pace, and he's able to, he's a really good finisher, actually. So it's like, if you can get to that back post that he loves to do, it's inevitable, right? That's what we were saying, on social media after the goal from his teammates and everyone, Spurs fans, everyone. It's inevitable if you can get Brennan at the back post, he's going to score the goal. But it's like, I think that's just the thing where he's going to have some competition with somebody else coming into the squad, if that's going to be Savinho or something like that. I think that Brendan just has too many holes in his game that it would be, I think, a real big upgrade for somebody like Savinho, or even this next player we're going to look at, who had a brief cameo, but played pretty well in that cameo, being Wilson Odebear. So I just wanted to run through this scenario real quick because I thought this was just great. This is, I think, one of the first touches he takes as he comes into the game. Gets the ball, he's driving onto the ball, turnover created back there, gets on the ball, and look at this move that he puts on. That's Rodri. That's our Ballon d'Or winner. That's the Ballon d'Or winner from last season. I mean, look at this. Turns him and then blows past him. And then at that point, he really doesn't have much to do. There's really no options for him to play a ball in for an attacking opportunity or anything like that. But like, I think what Wilson has been able to do this season, as it looks like he's a lot more healthy, I think he's really coming on strong. And I know there was those reports early in preseason that Thomas Frank was a big fan of him, and I don't know how true those were because it seems like he hasn't played him nearly as much recently. But I think you can see that, like, Brennan Johnson maybe is just not suited for that position, and there might be more that he can get out of that position with a different profile of player. And I would actually be really interested to see Brennan Johnson play as one of those two strikers if Frank ever moves back to that 5 at the back position formation. And previously it was Mo Kudus and Richie as the two strikers. And that's how he played a lot of times at Forest. And if you remember, Thomas Frank, when he was at Brentford, really wanted to bring Brennan in to Brentford from Forest when Frank was still there. And you would have to assume that based on what he was doing at Forest, that's probably what he had a vision for him as one of those two strikers that ended up being Mbeumo and Visa at a lot of times in his system. So I don't know. I think that that's something that could be an option for Brennan, because I mean, I love Brennan. I don't want to just like kick Brennan out of the squad completely. That's kind of why I wanted to go over some of the things that he does well. But it is a situation where you think that there's probably players of a different profile that could bring more to that position. So anyways, so that's kind of all I wanted to go over this one. Really, really excited about the way that this squad is coming together and the players that we have. And we'll go over some transfer stuff tomorrow, but like if we can only get, if we could just get a few signings in the door and to bolster up the squad even more, I'm so excited about the way that we're going to be able to go up against big teams in the Champions League this season. I think we're going to actually have a really good chance at finishing high up in the table in the Champions League and not having our league form dramatically be hurt by that. But the one caveat in that is injuries. You never know what's going to happen with injuries. And right now our squad is pretty thin in a lot of positions. So we need to get those signings through the door to give Frank the most to work with, because to see the most potential and what he can do with the squad. Because I think if he has all the pieces that he needs, the squad's in a really good position to do a lot of good things this season. I think we have a good chance of finishing high up in the Champions League table and probably mid to high up in the Premier League table, all things considered, if we can get all the pieces to the puzzle that Frank needs. So fingers crossed that's going to happen. We'll see. We'll check in with that tomorrow and see what the latest rumors are in the transfer market at that point, only with 6 days left in the market. So anyways, we'll close that one out here. Say fantastic performance, 2-0 Tottenham. Happy to see it. And I'm very excited for things to come. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.